Today I want to talk to you guys about a tool we use on our farm that saves us easily almost 200 hours of work a year. That is, of course, the Quick Cut Greens Harvester by Farmer's Friend LLC. This is the 2.0 model. I'm going to talk about that one today. I'm going to compare it to the first one, which I did make a previous video on, which you can see on my channel. But we're going to today talk about the 2.0, how we use it, and some things that are important to understand if you're going to maintain the tool. That's coming up next on The Urban Farmer. Okay, first of all, this tool is a major game changer for market gardeners because it allows you to increase your harvesting of cut and come again salad greens by tenfold. For example, it used to take us 8 hours a week to harvest all the greens we need on a farm. So generally that was 2 people working about 4 hours, total of 8 hours of labor. Today, we've increased our greens production and we can do all of our harvesting of greens in less than 45 minutes. So from 8 hours to 45 minutes, and we get the same quality of product. In fact, I would say we get a slightly better quality of product because it allows us to harvest things when they're very small. And harvesting greens at a very baby stage is difficult by hand. It of course can be done, but it's very, very tedious. Here's one example of that. This is a bed of mixed tatsoi and scarlet frills mustard, and to harvest this by hand is incredibly difficult, not only because the bed is so densely planted, but because the greens are only about 2.5 inches off the ground. So you have to just grab little tiny bits and harvest, small handfuls at a time, and it takes forever and it's very time consuming. Whereas with the Quick Greens Harvester, I can harvest this bed in minutes. One thing that's very important about this tool is you have to keep the blades extremely sharp. So that can be one or two things. You can either order new blades and just keep changing it, which works and it's costly, but the cost really is negligible compared to the amount of cost this tool saves you. Or you can sharpen it. And I have the old school manual sharpener, the diamond sharpener, which I don't really recommend. It's too time consuming. You got to go in and just sharpen each of these grooves in the serrated blade. It takes too much time. So the Farmer's Friend guys have recently put out it almost looks like a belt sander type tool to sharpen this blade. I would suggest that. What I've been doing up until now is I have a number of blades that I'd cycled through, and then when I have time, there's not much else to do, I would just sharpen the blades. But I'm just going to order one of those new sharpeners anyways, because I don't have time to do this kind of thing anymore. Let me first explain to you guys how this tool works. It's really brilliant. Basically what you have is a drill that powers an axle, and there's a little cam down here, and I'll turn this on. And it moves the blade at the same time as moving these little brushes. And these brushes essentially are what pushes the greens back into the basket as you harvest while moving the blade at the same time. It's all powered with, I use a 20 volt DeWalt drill, and I have a couple of batteries that we can cycle through. The one thing that is a small thing they could change is you get a bigger Velcro so that you can use the bigger batteries, because I find the small batteries don't last as long as the thicker ones. So that'd be one thing I'd change, and that's pretty easy to do it yourself, is just get a longer piece of Velcro around here to connect onto to have a wider battery. So minor thing, not a big deal. So that's how the tool works. So what's different about this tool than the first one is that they've gone to having just a single blade, whereas the original has 2 blades. And so this one I'm actually in the process of repairing, but I'll just show you here that it had 2 blades. So one blade was static, that stayed in there, and then the other blade oscillated on top of that. And the first one is a very effective tool. It worked great. I just found that you know, what's the point of having two blades if you can get the same thing done with one? I think that's probably why they changed it. It's just more work to sharpen two blades. And I often found that the two blades, if you didn't clean it methodically, which I suggest doing, and I'll show you how to do that, if you don't clean it methodically, things will get stuck between the blades and it'll jam up, and that can cause all kinds of problems. But if you clean the tool properly, then it isn't a big deal. So on the 2.0 design, they've basically simplified the way the drill is mounted, which I really like. Right now, the drill basically just goes onto this piece, and I'll just put the camera down for a sec to turn it off to show you. Okay, so I've loosened off the drill here, and you can see how easily it just comes off. The older model, it had this sort of nebulous mounting system that you had to jam your drill in there and then put these straps around it. And then get it into this axle, which was a bit complicated because it had these little cushions in there so that this could move, I guess, if it needed to, which was kind of pointless. So the whole way it was mounted was a lot more complicated, whereas on the second model here, it's just a lot more simple, and the machine's a little bit lighter weight as a result of that. More or less, it's just as effective as the first. In the field, if you keep the blades sharp and you clean it properly, the tool is just as effective. It's just that it's a little bit more simplified here, and a little, you know, it's easier to take your drill on and off, which sometimes I need, because sometimes I need to use this drill for fixing something or whatever it is. So it comes on and off a lot easier in this context, which I like, whereas this one you had to unmount it and unstrap it, and it was kind of a hassle. But again, still works. First one is still a great product, but I think the second one just improved on some things that made it a little bit more simple. One little hack that I've done on this tool is they normally have this little pin that goes into this hole on the edge. I'll just show it to you on the first one to keep the blade in line. It goes down in here. And so in this one it would go there. I've replaced it with a little bit of a bolt because I found that this thing was continuously popping out on the field for me. So I just went to the hardware store, got a 1/2-inch machine bolt, and put it in there, and it's kind of loose. Like it's not in there super tight to restrict the blade from moving. So it still moves freely, but then I don't have to mess around, because I've actually lost this in beds of greens before. And so if I just put in a machine bolt in there, which is a 50-cent fix or less, that's basically solved that problem for me. As far as basic maintenance goes of this tool, it isn't really that complicated. One thing that I would recommend if you buy it is buy the extra parts kit right away, just so that you have it on draw. If you break a bearing or you lose a particular like special piece in here that you can't just find at any hardware store, buy this just so if you're in mid-season and you're high production, you're not without this tool for a week, which happened to me last year, and it was a nightmare. We were doing a few 100 pounds of greens a week, and since I'm in Canada and this tool comes from the US, we didn't have this tool for a week while we're waiting for the parts. I would never make that mistake again, because we were hand cutting greens, adding another 10 or more hours a week to our labor, which didn't need to happen. So when you buy the tool, buy the spare kits right away. Even buy yourself a couple extra blades. That way you're covered. The other thing that's really simple to do is every time you come back to your home base after you've been harvesting, is clean it off right away. If you go and harvest in the field and then you just put the tool away, you're gonna have greens and all kinds of residual stuff get stuck on the blade and in between the blade, and it's gonna crust up. It's not gonna look nice, but it's also gonna potentially jam up the blade. So as soon as we come back to our home base after harvesting, first thing I do is I put this machine on my washing screen, and I take a power washer and I just do that. It's simple, keeps it clean, gets off any residual stuff that would cause any problems. Now it's time to see this puppy in action. I'm gonna go harvest a bed in my front yard and show you exactly how this thing works. Okay, we're gonna compare how long it takes to harvest. I put out a measuring tape. How long it takes to harvest 2 feet of greens with my hand knife, which is just basically a serrated steak knife that's really sharp, And I'm pretty good at hand harvesting greens, so we'll see how long that takes, and then we'll compare it to the greens harvester. One thing I will say, in recording this, I already had cut myself with this, which is pretty typical. I remember before I got a greens harvester that I would be cutting myself often enough. Maybe it was only one time a month, but it was enough that it sucks, and that never happens there. If you're careful with that, there's no accidents with that, or there shouldn't be any. Whereas when you're harvesting by a knife, because your two hands are coming in intersecting a lot, it's a lot easier to have a slight slip and cut your fingers of your the hand you're holding the greens with. So that is the quick cut greens harvester, and you can obviously see the difference in harvesting times. It's very staggering, and the quality is also pretty staggering in the sense that if you notice that when I was hand harvesting the really small greens of the tatsoi, it's really difficult to get your hands in there and without cutting yourself, for one, because the knife will come near your index finger or your pointing finger, and it's dangerous. It's also extremely hard to cut down there just in general, and it's super slow, so you can see how much of a difference this made. One thing I didn't mention is that I just made a little do-it-yourself cover for the blade. It's just a folded piece of cardboard with a couple clamps on it, and that just makes it safer when you're transporting it, because this blade is super sharp and you really do need to keep it sharp in order for the tool to be effective. So I suggest sharpening or changing your blades at least 3 times a season in order to get that, because you will notice over time it'll start to push the greens over, and you won't get a really nice good looking growth back, and it'll also affect your yields because you'll be pushing greens down instead of cutting them. So you do need to watch out for that. And yeah, so that's basically the tool. I wouldn't run a market garden today without this tool. I wouldn't even consider it. If I was going to be growing cut and come again greens, I wouldn't even get into business without this tool. It makes such a difference in the quality of the product, in the time you harvest, and also on your back. Like, you still do need to bend over with this tool, but it's not that big of a deal, and you're bent over for a fraction of the time. So again, not really a big deal. It's really a quality of life thing when you really boil it down. Is how much time do you want to spend bending over with your hands, potentially cutting your fingers each time? I don't want to do that much. I'm getting older. So this tool is really worth every single penny. It lists for around $500, and there's a link below if you guys are interested, you want to check it out. It's there. Yeah, again, I wouldn't farm without this tool. Really good work to the guys down at Farmers Friend LLC. They really made the second version a lot better than the first, though the first was still a super innovative and effective tool, but they did touch up a couple things with it with the 2.0, so hats off to them. Alright guys, you want to see more stuff like this, please hit the subscribe button right now. Like and share these videos with your friends, and check out my online course, profitableurbanfarming.com, and my book at theurbanfarmer.co. And if you'd like to make a donation to the show, it's always welcome, and you can do that at theurbanfarmer.co/support. Alright, thanks for watching.